My name is Charlotte Anderson, and I am 28 years old. I built my tech company from a cramped dorm room while everyone told me to be realistic. Today, at my graduation with my family watching, my father texted me something that broke my heart. But what happened next changed everything. 4 years of sleepless nights, rejection, and sacrifice led to this moment when my phone buzzed twice within minutes. The first message crushed me. The second one made history. Growing up as the only daughter with two older brothers in the Anderson household meant living in a constant state of being overlooked. My father, Harold Anderson, built his construction supply company from the ground up in the 1980s. He was a self-made man who prided himself on his business acumen and traditional values. In our family, tradition meant one thing: business was for men, and women were meant for supporting roles. From my earliest memories, I watched my father groom my brothers, James and Thomas, to eventually take over Anderson Building Supply. He would bring them to the office on weekends, teaching them about inventory management, profit margins, and leadership. When I asked to come along at age 8, my father laughed and patted my head. "This is boring stuff, princess. Why not help your mother with dinner instead?" My mother, Elizabeth, was the perfect corporate wife. She hosted business dinners, maintained our home immaculately, and never contradicted my father in public. In private, she would sometimes whisper encouragement to me, but always followed with, "Just don't let your father hear about it." She loved me, I know that, but she had accepted her role in life and expected me to do the same. Despite the lack of encouragement, I showed an aptitude for mathematics and computer science from an early age. In 3rd grade, I won the state mathematics competition, beating students 2 grades above me. My father attended the ceremony but remarked afterward that it was cute how I enjoyed playing with numbers. When my teacher called home to discuss my potential, suggesting advanced classes and mentoring, my father thanked her politely and never mentioned it again. By high school, I had taught myself coding through online tutorials and built a scheduling app that the school administration actually implemented for managing extracurricular activities. The local newspaper ran a small story about it. My father saw the article and commented, "Computers are just a phase. Real business happens face to face." My brothers received new cars for their 16th birthdays. I received a laptop that my father deemed practical for schoolwork. Little did he know I would use that laptop to begin building what would eventually become Secure Connect, my company specializing in encrypted communication software for businesses. When college application time came, I applied to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology without telling my parents. My guidance counselor helped me with the application process, recognizing what my parents could not see. When the acceptance letter arrived, my mother was genuinely happy for me, but worried about my father's reaction. "What are you going to do at MIT?" my father scoffed when I announced my acceptance at dinner. "Waste 4 years when you could be getting real-life experience? Technology is mostly smoke and mirrors. Anyway, look at all these businesses failing." "It's the top engineering school in the country," I said quietly. "Engineering is not for girls, Charlotte. You'll struggle, get discouraged, and drop out." "Then what?" "I won't drop out," I promised. After weeks of arguments, my father reluctantly agreed to pay for my first year at MIT, with conditions. I had to maintain a 4.0 GPA, work part-time to cover my personal expenses, and call home weekly to report my progress. "1 year," he said, "then we'll see if this is just a waste of my money." The night before I left for Cambridge, my mother came to my room. "Your father means well," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "He just wants to protect you from disappointment." "He doesn't believe in me," I replied, folding the last of my clothes into my suitcase. "He doesn't understand you," she corrected. "Maybe someday you can show him." I zipped my suitcase closed with determination. "I will show him. I promise you that." As I boarded the plane to Boston the next morning, my father's final words echoed in my head. "When this tech fantasy fails, there will always be a receptionist position at Anderson Building Supply." I stared out the airplane window, watching my hometown shrink beneath me, and made a silent vow. I would never be answering phones at my father's company. I would build something of my own, something so undeniably successful that even Harold Anderson could not dismiss it. I just had no idea then how completely that vow would transform my life. MIT was everything I had hoped for, and more challenging than I had feared. During orientation week, I found myself surrounded by brilliant minds from around the world. For the first time in my life, Nobody questioned whether I belonged in a technical field because I was female. The only question was whether I could keep up intellectually. The workload was crushing. I took a full course load of computer science and business classes while working 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore to fulfill my promise to my father. My roommate, Natalie Kim, rarely saw me awake. I would return from work at 9, study until 2 o'clock in the morning, catch 4 hours of sleep, and repeat the cycle. "You're going to burn out," Natalie warned me one night, finding me asleep on my keyboard. "I can't afford to slow down," I mumbled, splashing cold water on my face. "My dad's only paying for 1 year. After that, I need scholarships. Or I'm out." By midterms, I was physically exhausted, but academically thriving. I earned the highest grade in my Introduction to Algorithms class, catching the attention of Professor Alan Blackwell, who would later become my most important mentor. "Charlotte," he called out after class one day, "that encryption solution you proposed for the lab challenge, have you considered its commercial applications?" I hadn't. I had been too busy surviving to think about innovation. But Professor Blackwell saw something in my approach that I had missed. "The financial sector would pay a premium for that level of security," he said. "Come to my office hours. Let's talk about it." Those office hours changed the trajectory of my life. Professor Blackwell helped me refine my encryption algorithm and introduced me to graduate students working on similar problems. For the first time, I began thinking beyond grades and survival. By second semester, I had assembled a small group of like-minded students. There was Zach Torres, a brilliant coder with a background in quantum computing, Diana Chen, who understood user experience design better than anyone I had ever met, and Marcus Washington, whose business acumen complemented my technical skills. We began meeting in my dorm room on Sunday afternoons, developing what would eventually become Secure Connect. Our idea was simple but powerful: create an encryption system for business communications that was both unbreakable and user-friendly. "Most security solutions sacrifice usability for protection," I explained to the group. "We can build something that does both." My father called every Sunday evening as agreed. Our conversations followed a predictable pattern. "How are your grades?" he would ask. "All A's so far," I would answer. "And the job?" "Still employed, getting more hours during holidays." "Good. Any thoughts about what you'll do when the year ends?" I never mentioned our startup idea during these calls. I knew exactly what he would say. Another example of me living in a fantasy world. By April of freshman year, we had a working prototype. Professor Blackwell encouraged us to enter the university's annual business competition, which offered $50,000 in seed funding to the winner. "We're not ready," I protested. "You're more ready than you think," he countered. "The judges need to see this." The night before the competition, I called my mother instead of my father. "I might have a chance at winning some money tomorrow," I said carefully, "for a business idea." "That's wonderful, honey," she said. "What kind of business?" I explained our encryption software as simply as I could. "Your father always says business is about solving problems," she said when I finished. "It sounds like you're solving an important one." "Do you think he would be proud?" I asked, hating how young I sounded. There was a pause. "I think he would be surprised," she answered honestly. "But someday he will be proud. I already am." The next day, we won first place and $50,000 in seed funding. The university press release included a photo of our team holding an oversized check. I sent the link to my parents. My father's response came hours later. "Playing entrepreneur on the university's dime, I see. Focus on your grades." That summer, instead of returning home, I stayed in Cambridge and worked on Secure Connect. The seed money allowed us to rent a tiny office space off campus and pay ourselves minimal stipends. I called my father to tell him I would not need his financial support for sophomore year. "So you're dropping out?" he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "No, I received an academic scholarship. I'll be continuing my education while developing our business." There was a long silence. "Businesses need customers, Charlotte. They need revenue. Who's buying your computer program?" I had no answer for that yet. We had no customers, no revenue. "That's what I thought," he said. "Well, good luck with your scholarship. At least you're not wasting my money anymore." Sophomore year, I reduced my course load to part-time status, focusing the majority of my energy on Secure Connect. We worked 18-hour days refining our product and pitching to potential clients. We faced rejection after rejection. "No one trusts security software from college students," Marcus observed after our 15th failed pitch. "Then we need to stop looking like college students," I decided. We rebranded, created professional materials, and practiced our pitch until we could deliver it in our sleep. And then finally, we got our first yes from a small financial advisory firm willing to take a chance on us. The day we received our first payment of $10,000, I took the team out for pizza. As we celebrated, I thought about calling my father to share the news, but decided against it. I wanted our success to be undeniable before I faced his skepticism again. Little did I know that our first client would lead to 5 more, and those 5 to a dozen more. By the end of my sophomore year, Secure Connect was generating enough revenue to hire 2 more developers and move to a legitimate office space. I was no longer just a student, I was a CEO. Our early success proved to be both a blessing and a curse. With our growing client list came growing expectations, and we were still a company run by students with limited experience. The summer after sophomore year brought our first major crisis. One of our financial clients experienced a security breach. It wasn't our fault. They had implemented our software incorrectly, ignoring our installation guidelines. But the client publicly blamed our inexperienced team and threatened legal action. "We can't afford a lawsuit," Marcus warned during an emergency team meeting. "We barely have enough runway for 3 months as is." I hadn't slept in 48 hours, trying to help the client recover their data while also defending our reputation. "We need a lawyer," I said, "and we need money to pay that lawyer," which meant we needed investors. Until then, we had been bootstrapping, using our competition winnings and revenue to fund growth, but legal troubles would quickly drain our modest bank account. The next 2 weeks were a blur of investor pitches. I created a presentation highlighting our technology, traction, and team, then took it to every venture capital firm in Boston. The responses were painfully consistent. "Your technology seems promising, but your team lacks experience. Come back when you have a seasoned CEO. Have you considered bringing on a male co-founder? It might help with credibility in the security space." After one particularly demoralizing rejection, I sat on a park bench and called my mother, something I rarely allowed myself to do when feeling vulnerable. "Maybe Dad was right," I admitted. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this." "Your father has been wrong about many things," she said firmly. "Don't make him right by giving up." The next day, I had a pitch meeting with Catherine Bailey of Artemis Ventures, one of the few female-led VC firms in Boston. I arrived sleep-deprived and discouraged, expecting another rejection. Catherine listened to my pitch without interruption, asked detailed technical questions that showed she actually understood our product, and then leaned forward. "You remind me of myself 20 years ago," she said. "Brilliant, determined, and completely underestimated. I'm going to invest $500,000 for 10% of your company, and I'm going to connect you with the best tech lawyer in my network." I nearly cried with relief. But she continued, "You need to promise me something. When you succeed, and you will succeed, you will remember what it feels like to be dismissed because of your age and gender, and you will help the next young woman who comes to you with a brilliant idea." "I promise," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. With Catherine's investment, we survived the legal threat, settling with the client for a fraction of what they initially demanded. The experience taught us to be more careful with client onboarding and to document everything meticulously. It also taught me that having the right investor could be transformative. Catherine became more than a financial backer. She became a mentor and advocate, introducing us to potential clients, helping us refine our business model, and coaching me on leadership skills. By the end of junior year, Secure Connect had 15 employees, working from a converted warehouse space in Kendall Square. We were generating consistent revenue, though we were still far from profitable after covering salaries, rent, and development costs. Each new hire brought both excitement and anxiety. These people were trusting their livelihoods to my vision. What if I failed them? What if my father was right about my capabilities? The pressure manifested physically. I developed insomnia and stress-induced migraines. I lost 15 pounds without trying. My academic advisor called me into her office, concerned about my declining grades. "You need to make a choice," she said gently, "your company or your degree. You can't keep doing both at this pace." I chose the company, but negotiated to remain enrolled part-time. Graduation would take longer, but I refused to be a dropout. That would be giving my father the satisfaction of being right. Our breakthrough came in the fall of my senior year. Our team developed a significant innovation in our encryption algorithm that made it both more secure and more efficient. When we announced the update, our client list suddenly expanded from regional firms to national enterprises. Monthly revenue tripled in 60 days. We hired rapidly to keep up with demand, moving to a larger office and bringing on experienced professionals who commanded higher salaries than we could really afford. It was a calculated risk. We needed their expertise to scale properly. One of those hires was Jennifer Lawrence, a seasoned chief financial officer who had guided 2 previous startups to acquisition. At 52, she was 24 years older than me and brought a steadying presence to our young company. "You have something special here," she told me during her first week, "but you're growing too fast without proper financial controls. Let me help you build a sustainable business, not just an impressive technology." Under Jennifer's guidance, we restructured our pricing model, improved our cash flow management, and began serious discussions about long-term growth strategy. For the first time, I had a leadership team that didn't consist of my college friends. When we landed our first Fortune 500 client, a major financial services corporation, I finally called my father with news I thought would impress him. "Dad, Secure Connect just signed a 7-figure contract with Allied Financial," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. There was a pause. "That's a significant client," he acknowledged. "But tech companies come and go, Charlotte. How sustainable is this business of yours?" "We have 40 employees now, consistent growth, major clients." "And are you profitable?" We weren't yet. We were reinvesting every dollar into growth. "I thought so," he said when I didn't immediately answer. "Be careful not to let this distract you from finishing your degree. You'll need something to fall back on when this tech bubble bursts." I hung up, feeling deflated. Would anything ever be enough to make him believe in me? That night, I stayed late at the office, reviewing our financial projections with Jennifer. "Your father still doesn't get it, does he?" she asked. I hadn't realized she had overheard my call. "He never will," I sighed. "My father was the same way," she said, surprising me. "He thought women belonged in teaching or nursing. He never came to see my corner office at Goldman Sachs." "How did you deal with that?" I asked. She smiled. "I stopped seeking his approval and started seeking his respect. Those are different things. You may never get the first, but you can demand the second." I took her words to heart. I would stop trying to make my father proud. Instead, I would build something so undeniably successful that respect would be the only option. The 18 months following our major client breakthrough were a whirlwind of growth and challenges. Secure Connect expanded from 40 employees to over 120, outgrowing our office space twice. We moved into a gleaming glass building in downtown Boston with our logo emblazoned on the entrance doors. Every morning, walking into that building filled me with a mixture of pride and terror. So many people were now dependent on my leadership. So many things could still go wrong. Jennifer proved to be not just a skilled CFO, but an invaluable mentor. She had navigated the waters I now found myself in and knew every hidden reef and current. "You need to raise a proper Series A round," she advised, "as our cash reserves dwindled despite growing revenue. We need capital to sustain this growth rate." The idea of pitching to investors again brought back painful memories of rejection. But Secure Connect was a different company now. We had impressive clients, proven technology, and actual revenue. Catherine from Artemis Ventures led our Series A round, bringing in several larger firms as co-investors. We raised $12 million at a valuation of $60 million. The tech press took notice, with TechCrunch running a feature titled Secure Connect, the female-founded security startup taking enterprise by storm. My mother sent me the article with a simple message: "So proud of you, honey." My father did not contact me, but I heard through my brother James that he had seen the coverage. "He asked if your company was really worth that much, or if it was just investor hype," James reported. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him to read the article and form his own opinion," James said. "For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is incredible. Tom does too, though he'd never say it to Dad." My brothers and I had grown distant as adults. They had both joined Anderson Building Supply after college, taking the path of least resistance. I sometimes wondered if they resented my rebellion or envied my freedom. With our Series A funding secured, we expanded aggressively into new markets. The personal cost was enormous. I hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. My diet consisted primarily of takeout eaten at my desk. I had broken up with my boyfriend of 6 months because I couldn't give him more than 1 night a week of my time. "You need to delegate more," Jennifer urged after finding me asleep at my desk at 2 in the morning. "This company can't depend solely on you." "I'm fine," I insisted, though the dark circles under my eyes told a different story. You're killing yourself, she countered, and that helps no one. Build a leadership team you trust. Let them carry some of the weight. Reluctantly, I began to delegate, hiring a chief technology officer to oversee our engineering team and a chief operating officer to manage day-to-day operations. It was harder than I expected to relinquish control, but necessary for both my health and the company's growth. As Secure Connect became more visible in the industry, competitors took notice. Larger security firms began developing similar products. Some tried to poach our key engineers with offers of double their current salaries. Others spread rumors about our technology's reliability. This is actually a good sign, Catherine reassured me during one of our regular advisor meetings. They wouldn't bother if you weren't a threat. One competitor went beyond ethical boundaries, attempting to hack our systems to steal our proprietary code. The irony of a security company being targeted wasn't lost on me, but our own protections held. We traced the attack and sent a cease and desist letter that put an end to their efforts. Through all of this, I maintained my part-time student status at MIT, determined to complete my degree. I was now in my 5th year, taking just 1 or 2 classes per semester. My father had long since stopped asking about my academic progress, assuming I had dropped out. In the spring of that 5th year, my academic advisor called me in for a meeting. "You have enough credits to graduate this May," she informed me, reviewing my transcript. "Really?" I had lost track, focusing on completing 1 course at a time. "Really? You'll graduate with honors despite your unconventional path." She smiled. "The commencement committee has actually been discussing you." "Me? Why?" "They're considering you for the student commencement speech. Your story is rather remarkable, Charlotte. Building a multi-million-dollar company while completing your degree." I was stunned. "I'm not sure I have time to write a speech." "Think about it," she urged. "It would be a powerful message to other young entrepreneurs." That evening, I called my mother with the news. "I'm graduating in May," I said, "with honors." "Oh, Charlotte," her voice filled with genuine joy. "We'll all be there. Your father, too." "He doesn't have to come," I said quickly. "He's your father. Of course he'll come." Her tone left no room for argument. The thought of my father attending my graduation filled me with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted him to see my success, to finally acknowledge that I had proven him wrong. Another part dreaded his inevitable dismissal of my achievements. As graduation approached, Secure Connect faced its biggest decision yet. Several larger tech companies had approached us about acquisition, offering eye-watering sums. At the same time, our board was discussing the possibility of an initial public offering. "The IPO market is strong right now," Jennifer explained during a late-night strategy session. "With our growth metrics and client list, we could command a significant valuation." "But is the company ready?" I asked. "Are we ready?" "We'd need to get our financials in perfect order, strengthen the board with some recognized names. But yes, I believe we are ready." The timing was surreal. The IPO preparation would coincide almost exactly with my graduation, 2 culminations arriving simultaneously. We decided to move forward with the IPO process, working with investment banks to prepare our S-1 filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The process was exhausting, requiring endless meetings with lawyers, auditors, and bankers. The week before graduation, we made the confidential filing, but kept the news quiet. The public announcement would come later, after the SEC review. Only our executive team and board knew the details. I declined the commencement speech opportunity, lacking the time to prepare properly. Instead, I would graduate quietly, just another student crossing the stage, albeit one running a company valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. My parents and brothers would fly in the day before the ceremony. It would be the first time I had seen my father in over 2 years. I arranged for them to stay at the Four Seasons, my small act of showing how far I had come from the struggling freshman he had reluctantly supported. The night before graduation, Jennifer called me with news that took my breath away. "The bankers think we should price the IPO higher than we discussed," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "The demand is incredible. We're looking at a potential billion-dollar valuation on day 1. $1 billion. The number seemed unreal. "When will we know for sure?" I asked. "The final pricing will happen tomorrow morning. I'll call you the moment it's confirmed." Tomorrow morning, graduation morning. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We have landed. See you tomorrow at the ceremony. We are all so proud." I wondered if that all truly included my father. The morning of my graduation dawned with a perfect May sky. blue and cloudless. I woke at 5:30, too anxious to sleep any longer. My apartment, a modest one-bedroom I rarely saw due to my long hours at the office, was walking distance from campus. I checked my phone immediately. No calls from Jennifer yet about the IPO pricing. The investment bankers on the East Coast would be working on finalizing the numbers right now. I had a notification from the SEC secure portal indicating some minor comments on our filing, but nothing that would delay our timeline. As I showered and dressed, I tried to focus on the graduation ceremony rather than the IPO. Today should be about celebrating my academic achievement, the degree I had stubbornly pursued despite my father's skepticism and the demands of running a company. I chose a simple black dress to wear under my graduation gown, professional but not flashy. My cap and gown hung on the back of my door, the tassel dangling off the mortarboard. After 5 years of part-time study while building Secure Connect, the sight of that cap and gown felt surreal. My phone rang at 7:15. "We have a preliminary price," Jennifer said without preamble. "The underwriters are recommending $42 per share." I did a quick mental calculation. That would put us just over $1 billion market cap on day one. "And," she finished for me, "a unicorn at IPO. It's rare, Charlotte, really rare." My hands trembled slightly. "When will it be final?" "The pricing committee meets in an hour. Barring any last-minute changes, we should have confirmation by 9:30. The announcement will go out shortly after that." "My graduation ceremony starts at 10 o'clock. I can call you when it's official. Will your phone be on?" "Yes, I'll keep it on vibrate." After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process what this meant. $1 billion valuation would change everything. It would validate all the years of hard work, all the nights I had slept on my office couch, all the doubts I had pushed through. It would also be the ultimate answer to my father's dismissal of my playing entrepreneur. I took a deep breath and pushed that thought away. I had long since stopped making decisions to prove my father wrong. Secure Connect was about creating something meaningful, something that protected people's data and privacy. The valuation was a side effect, not the goal. At 8:30, I headed toward campus to meet my family at the designated gathering spot for graduates and their guests. The walk helped calm my nerves, the familiar paths of MIT grounding me in the journey that had brought me here. I spotted my mother first, elegant in a blue dress and jacket. Next to her stood my brothers James and Thomas, both in suits, and then my father, stern-faced as always, his posture rigid in his perfectly tailored suit. He looked older than I remembered, his hair now more gray than brown. "Charlotte," my mother hurried toward me, arms outstretched. Her hug was tight, genuine. "We are so proud of you, honey." My brothers each gave me quick hugs, offering congratulations. Then I stood before my father, unsure of the appropriate greeting after so much time and distance. He extended his hand formally. "Congratulations on completing your degree, Charlotte." Not a hug, not even, "I'm proud of you," just acknowledgement of a task completed. I shook his hand, feeling a familiar disappointment settle in my chest. "Thank you for coming." "Your mother insisted," he said, as if I might have wondered about his presence otherwise. We made awkward small talk as other families reunited around us, with much more enthusiasm. My mother filled the silence with questions about the ceremony and plans for a celebration lunch afterward. "I made reservations at Harvest," I said, naming one of Cambridge's finest restaurants. My father raised an eyebrow. "Business must be going well." "It is," I said simply, unwilling to elaborate. Let the IPO news speak for itself when it came. An announcement called for graduates to begin lining up according to school and department. I needed to join the engineering school procession. "I have to go," I said. "The family seating is in Section C. I'll see you after the ceremony." My mother hugged me again. "We'll be watching for you." As I walked away, I heard my father say to my brothers, "At least she finished the degree. She'll need it when this tech bubble bursts." Some things never changed. I joined the line of engineering graduates, adjusting my cap and checking that my phone was on vibrate in the pocket I had sewn into my dress specifically for today. All around me, fellow graduates were taking selfies, laughing, celebrating with friends. I stood alone, my mind divided between the ceremony ahead and the IPO, pricing being finalized across town. The procession began at 9:45, with graduates filing into the grand auditorium where the ceremony would take place. From my position, I could see Section C where my family would be seated. I spotted my mother's blue outfit, my father's rigid posture beside her. At 9:52, my phone vibrated. Jennifer. I stepped slightly out of line to check the message. Pricing confirmed at $44 per share. Final valuation, $1.1 billion. Press release goes out in 15 minutes. Congratulations, Charlotte. You did it. $1 billion. My knees felt weak. I had founded a company now valued at over $1 billion. The unicorn status that so many startups dreamed of, but few achieved. And my father was about to find out. I rejoined the procession, moving forward on autopilot. The ceremony began with the traditional pomp and circumstance, university officials giving speeches about achievement and the future. I heard little of it, my mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. My phone vibrated again at 10:15. The press release had gone out. Within minutes, business news channels would be reporting on Secure Connect's IPO pricing. The tech and business press would be running stories about the female-founded unicorn. And soon, very soon, my father would know. As I sat waiting for my name to be called, my phone began vibrating continuously. Congratulatory messages from employees, investors, mentors. I ignored them all, focusing on maintaining my composure as the moment approached. Then at 10:32, a different kind of message from my father. I opened it with trembling fingers. Do not expect any help from me going forward. You are on your own. The words hit me like a physical blow. On today of all days, when I was graduating with honors and taking my company public at $1 billion valuation, his message was still one of rejection and abandonment. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. I would not cry, not now, not because of him. They called my name moments later. Charlotte Marie Anderson, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Engineering, with honors. I rose on unsteady legs and walked across the stage. The dean shook my hand, handed me my diploma. I managed a smile for the photographer, though inside I was shattered by my father's text. As I stepped off the stage, my phone vibrated again. Jennifer. I hesitated, then answered quietly, turning away from the ceremony. Charlotte, the stock is already trading up in the private placement. The IPO is a massive success. We just hit $1 billion in market cap. Everyone is calling about it. CNBC wants an interview. Bloomberg, too. I was still close enough to the stage that her excited voice carried. Several people nearby turned to look, including some faculty members. That's amazing news, I said, my voice carrying more than I intended. $1 billion IPO. I can hardly believe it. More heads turned. A murmur spread through the nearby graduates. $1 billion IPO. CEO. I turned toward the family seating area and saw my father's face. He was staring at me, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. He held his phone in his hand. He must have just seen the news alert about Secure Connect's IPO. The timing could not have been more perfect. Minutes after texting me that I was on my own, he discovered that his helpless daughter had just become the CEO of a public company worth more than $1 billion. Our eyes met across the auditorium. For the first time in my life, I saw something new in my father's gaze. It wasn't pride, it wasn't love, it was respect. The remainder of the graduation ceremony passed in a blur. I returned to my seat among fellow graduates who now looked at me with new interest, whispering questions I pretended not to hear. The university president continued with his closing remarks, but few people were listening. The buzz about the student CEO with the $1 billion IPO had swept through the auditorium. As we filed out following the recessional, several professors stopped to congratulate me, some mentioning they had just seen the news on their phones. Professor Blackwell, my earliest supporter, gave me a knowing smile and a thumbs up from across the crowd. The graduates dispersed to find their families in the designated meeting area outside. I spotted my mother first, waving excitedly. My brother stood beside her, looking impressed and slightly uncomfortable. My father stood a bit apart, his face unreadable, still clutching his phone. Charlotte! My mother embraced me tightly. Your company is all over the news. Why didn't you tell us? The timing was confidential until this morning, I explained. We couldn't disclose the IPO details before the official announcement. My brothers offered awkward congratulations, clearly unsure how to react to their little sister's sudden prominent success. James mentioned something about the stock price already rising in early trading. Thomas asked if I was now a billionaire. The company is valued at over $1 billion, I clarified. My ownership stake is significant but not majority. On paper, yes, I am now worth tens of millions at least. Throughout this exchange, my father remained silent, his expression stony. Finally, he stepped forward. "You kept this from us deliberately," he said. "It was a legal requirement," I replied evenly. "And honestly, would you have believed me if I had told you? Your text message came through just before they called my name." I held up my phone. "Do not expect any help from me going forward. You are on your own." "Interesting timing, Dad." My mother gasped. "Harold, you didn't—" My father's face flushed. "I was simply acknowledging your independence. You've made it clear you don't need family support." "That's not what you meant, and we both know it," I said, surprising myself with my calm. "You've never believed in me or what I was building. You've been waiting for me to fail since the day I left for MIT. Several nearby families had stopped to listen, recognizing me from the news alerts now circulating widely. Smartphones were pointed in our direction, people obviously recording the confrontation between the newly minted tech CEO and her father. "This is not the place for this discussion," my father said stiffly, noticing the attention. "I agree," I said. "Let's go to the restaurant. I have a private room reserved." As we walked across campus, my phone continuously buzzed with notifications. Jennifer had texted that the stock was now trading at $52 per share, well above our IPO price. The market was responding enthusiastically. At the restaurant, the staff recognized me immediately. "Congratulations on your IPO, Miss Anderson," the host said as he led us to the private dining room. "Your office sent over champagne." Indeed, a bottle of Dom Perignon sat chilling in an ice bucket with a note from my executive team. Once we were seated and the door closed, my father wasted no time. "So, this is why you've been so secretive about your company," he said, "planning your big reveal for maximum effect." "I've been building a legitimate business for 5 years," I replied. "The IPO is just the latest milestone, not the goal itself." "A technology business," he scoffed, "built on venture capital and hype." "Built on solving real security problems for major corporations," I corrected. "We have over 200 enterprise clients, including 40 Fortune 500 companies. Our encryption technology is the most advanced on the market." "And you managed all this while supposedly completing your degree?" "There's nothing supposedly about it," I said, placing my diploma on the table. "I finished what I started despite your predictions of failure." My mother placed her hand on my father's arm. "Harold, our daughter has accomplished something extraordinary. Can you not simply be proud of her?" He shrugged off her hand. "Extraordinary? We'll see if this company even exists in 5 years. Most of these tech startups crash and burn after the IPO." James, surprisingly, spoke up. "Dad, Secure Connect is not some fly-by-night operation. They're the leading provider in their sector. I looked them up after seeing Charlotte in TechCrunch last year. Their client list is impressive." My father turned to him, betrayal in his eyes. "You knew about this?" "I knew they were successful," James admitted. "I didn't know about the IPO." My phone rang. Jennifer again. I excused myself to take the call in the corner of the room. "Charlotte, I hate to interrupt your graduation, but the CNBC interview is scheduled for 3:00. We need you at the office by 2:00 to prepare." "I'll be there," I promised, ending the call. I returned to the table. "I apologize, but I need to cut this short. I have media obligations this afternoon." "More important than your family lunch?" my father demanded. "As important as your work obligations have always been," I replied evenly. "As CEO of a public company, I have responsibilities to our shareholders, employees, and clients." "Harold," my mother interjected, "perhaps we could reschedule dinner for this evening, after Charlotte's work commitments." I shook my head. "I'll be in meetings and interviews all day and likely late into the evening. The first day of trading is critical." "Of course it is," my father said sarcastically. "Your little computer program is more important than family." Something in me snapped. 5 years of dismissal, doubt, and derision crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. "My little computer program, as you call it, just created over $1 billion in value," I said, my voice steady. "It employs over 150 people who depend on me for their livelihoods. It protects the sensitive data of millions of users across our client base." I stood, gathering my things. "I did all of this while you were telling me I would fail, while you were betting against me at every turn, while you were grooming my brothers for your business, and telling me the best I could hope for was answering phones." The room fell completely silent. "I didn't build Secure Connect to prove you wrong, Dad. I built it because I believed in it. But your text today, telling me I'm on my own, just as I was walking across that stage, made one thing perfectly clear." I looked him directly in the eyes. "I've been on my own since the day I left for MIT, and look what I accomplished without your support or approval." My mother had tears in her eyes. My brothers looked stunned. My father opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. For once, Harold Anderson had no ready response. "I need to go," I said more gently now. "Jennifer has a car waiting to take me to the office." "Charlotte," my mother began. "It's okay, Mom," I assured her. "We can have dinner tomorrow night. You and the boys are welcome to visit the office tomorrow if you'd like a tour." I didn't include my father in the invitation. His expression shifted from shock to something harder, a defensive pride taking hold. "I have an early flight," he said stiffly. "Business requires my attention back home." "It always does," I replied. As I turned to leave, my father spoke again. "Charlotte." I paused, looking back at him. "Congratulations on your IPO," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "It is impressive. Not 'I'm proud of you,' not 'I was wrong,' just an acknowledgement of the undeniable." "Thank you," I said. "That might be the first genuine compliment you've ever given me." I left the restaurant to find a black town car waiting at the curb, Jennifer standing beside it. Her face lit up when she saw me. "There she is, the woman of the hour." She hugged me tightly. "We're up 60% from the IPO price. The market loves us." As I slid into the car, I glanced back at the restaurant. My father had emerged and stood watching, his expression inscrutable. Our eyes met briefly before the car pulled away. I had imagined this moment for years, the moment when my father would finally have to acknowledge my success. I had expected to feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. Freedom from seeking his approval. Freedom from defining myself in opposition to his expectations. I was Charlotte Anderson, CEO of Secure Connect, a publicly traded company valued at over $1 billion. That identity belonged to me alone, not defined by my father's opinion of it. As the car headed toward our headquarters, where champagne and celebration awaited, I took one last look at my graduation cap sitting beside me on the seat. 2 journeys completed in a single day, one chapter closed, another beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine, my first investor. "You proved them all wrong. Now show them what you will do next." I smiled, looking forward instead of back. The 48 hours following graduation and our IPO were a whirlwind of media interviews, investor calls, and employee celebrations. I barely slept, running on adrenaline and the exhilaration of seeing 5 years of work validated so dramatically in the public markets. By closing bell on the second day of trading, Secure Connect stock had stabilized at $71 per share, giving us a market cap of $1.6 billion. My personal stake, just under 20% after dilution through funding rounds, was theoretically worth over $300 million. Though lockup periods would prevent me from selling shares for 6 months, the financial reality was still abstract, numbers on paper rather than tangible wealth. What felt more real was the responsibility. 150 employees, thousands of shareholders, and millions of end users now depended on our continued success. On the evening of the second day, I finally made it back to my apartment to shower and change before dinner with my mother and brothers. My father, true to his word, had taken an early flight home, unwilling or unable to process the new reality of his daughter's success. As I changed into fresh clothes, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. I looked exhausted, but somehow different, as if the events of the past 2 days had physically transformed me. Perhaps it was simply the weight of responsibility settling visibly on my shoulders. My phone rang. Catherine, my first investor and mentor. "How are you holding up?" she asked when I answered. "Honestly, I'm not sure," I admitted. "It doesn't feel entirely real yet." "It never does at first," she said with a knowing laugh. "But the responsibility feels real immediately, doesn't it?" "Exactly." "How did things go with your father?" I saw the graduation timing coincided perfectly with the announcement. I sighed. As well as could be expected. He congratulated me, but it was clear he was only acknowledging what he couldn't deny. "Some people can't adapt when the narrative they've constructed is challenged," she said gently. "His story about you was that you'd fail without his guidance. Your success threatens his worldview." "I know," I said. "I just always thought that somewhere deep down he would want to be proven wrong about me." "Give him time," Catherine advised. "Some people need longer to reconcile their expectations with reality. Meanwhile, you have a company to run." After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, suddenly overwhelmed by fatigue and emotion. The confrontation with my father had left a hollow feeling amid the triumph. For years, I had pushed myself partly to prove him wrong. Now that I had done so in the most public and definitive way possible, the victory felt incomplete. My doorbell rang. My mother and brothers had arrived to pick me up for dinner. Over a quiet meal at a small Italian restaurant away from the financial district where I might be recognized, my mother finally asked the question that had been hanging in the air. "What happened between you and your father? When did it get so broken?" I twirled pasta on my fork, considering my answer. "It was never really whole to begin with, Mom. He never saw me as having the same potential as James and Thomas. When I chose a different path, it just confirmed what he already believed. He's proud in his way," she offered weakly. "No," I said gently. "He's impressed by what he can't dismiss. That's different from pride." James cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, Dad's been impossible to work with since the IPO news broke. He spent all day on the phone with his investment advisor trying to buy shares in your company." I nearly choked on my wine. "He what?" "Apparently he thinks it's a good investment now," James said with a wry smile, though he'd never admit that to you. "The irony is almost too perfect," I said, shaking my head. "What will you do now?" Thomas asked, changing the subject. "About Dad, I mean." It was the question I had been asking myself since graduation. What kind of relationship, if any, could I have with a father who had bet so consistently against me? "I'm not going to pursue his approval anymore," I said finally. "That chapter is closed, but I won't exclude him from my life out of spite either. The door remains open, on my terms." My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've become so wise, Charlotte. Stronger than I ever was." "You did your best, Mom," I assured her, returning the squeeze. "No," she said firmly. "I didn't. I should have stood up for you more. I let his dismissal of your dreams go unchallenged too often." "We can't change the past," I said, "but we can choose how we move forward." The next morning, I gave my family a tour of Secure Connect headquarters. The employees were still in celebration mode, though work continued. Many stopped to congratulate me and meet my family. "This is incredible," Thomas said as we walked through the engineering department where dozens of developers worked on our core technology. I had no idea it was so substantial. "What did you think I was doing all these years?" I asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged. "Honestly, Dad made it sound like you were playing around with computers in a glorified school project." "And you believed him without ever asking me?" Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. "I should have made up my own mind. I'm sorry, Charlotte." That afternoon, after my family departed for their flight home, Jennifer found me in my office reviewing our post-IPO strategy. "Your father called," she said without preamble. "He wanted to know if you would consider joining the board of Anderson Building Supply. He said, and I quote, 'Her business expertise would be valuable to our company.'" I laughed out loud, the absurdity of the request hitting me like a wave. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him you were in meetings all day, but that I would pass along the message." Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "What should I tell him when he inevitably calls back?" I considered the question carefully. My initial impulse was to refuse outright, to give him a taste of the rejection he had so freely offered me, but that impulse passed quickly, replaced by something more measured. "Tell him I'd be happy to discuss potential synergies between our companies," I said finally, "but my priority must remain Secure Connect, especially in this critical post-IPO period." Jennifer nodded approvingly. "Taking the high road, I would expect nothing less from you." In the weeks that followed, I found myself adjusting to a new normal. The media attention eventually died down, though I was now occasionally recognized on the streets of Boston. Our stock price stabilized. Employees settled back into their work routines, and the day-to-day challenges of running a public company became my new reality. My father never called back about the board position. Instead, he sent a formal email outlining his proposal, copying my brothers and our respective company attorneys. I responded with equal formality, declining the specific offer but suggesting alternative ways our companies might collaborate. What surprised me most in the aftermath of our IPO was how quickly the achievement itself became background noise. The validation I had sought for so long, once received, lost its shine more rapidly than I had expected. What remained important were the relationships formed along the way and the impact of our technology on the clients who depended on it. 3 months after graduation, I made a decision that surprised many but felt instinctively right to me. I established the Women Secure Connect Foundation with $50 million of my personal shares, creating a scholarship fund specifically for young women pursuing careers in cybersecurity and technology. The first recipient was a brilliant 19-year-old from rural Georgia, whose father, like mine, believed technology was not a suitable field for his daughter. When I called to inform her of the scholarship, she cried and said, "This changes everything. My whole future just opened up." Her words reminded me of my conversation with Catherine years earlier, when she had invested in Secure Connect with the condition that I would help the next young woman with a brilliant idea. The cycle of support was continuing, expanding beyond what either of us had initially imagined. My relationship with my father remained complicated. We settled into a détente of sorts, communicating primarily through formal channels about potential business connections. He never apologized for his years of doubt, but he stopped actively predicting my failure. In the world of Harold Anderson, this constituted significant progress. My mother visited often, delighting in the success I had built and finally expressing her own regrets about not supporting me more actively in the early years. "I was so afraid of disrupting the family," she confessed during one visit, "but I see now that harmony built on inequality is not really harmony at all." Perhaps the most profound change occurred within me. The drive to prove my father wrong, which had fueled so many late nights and pushed me through countless obstacles, gradually transformed into something healthier, a desire to prove myself right. Right about the market opportunity, right about our technology approach, right about the team I had built. 1 year after our IPO, I was invited back to MIT to give a lecture to engineering students about entrepreneurship. Standing at the podium in the same auditorium where I had graduated, I looked out at the eager faces and felt a sense of completion. "Success is not about proving others wrong," I told them. "Though that can be temporarily satisfying, true success is about proving yourself right, about validating your own vision of what is possible." A young woman raised her hand during the question period. "Did your father ever admit he was wrong about you?" The auditorium fell silent, waiting for my answer. "No," I said honestly, "and I no longer need him to." The most valuable lesson I learned in building Secure Connect was not about technology or business strategy. It was about defining success on my own terms rather than seeking external validation. As I left the stage to applause, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Saw your lecture was live streamed. Well said." No apology, no admission of error, but perhaps, in his way, a small step toward understanding. I smiled and put the phone away. My validation no longer came from Harold Anderson. It came from the hundreds of employees who trusted their careers to my leadership, from the clients who entrusted their sensitive data to our technology, from the young women who saw in my journey a map for their own. What did you think of my story? Have you ever had to navigate complicated family relationships while pursuing your dreams? If so, you know that the only validation that truly matters is the kind you give yourself.